Good afternoon to you, and I'm glad that you found time to be with us today. It is a minute past 3 p.m. here in Nairobi. Good morning, good evening, depending on where you are joining us and watching us from, and on the show this afternoon. As much as there are a couple of stories that I've seen that I'd like to bring us up to date with, but I'll not do that this afternoon because I'd promised that I will have us look at this story that has been developing from Ethiopia, and that is the recent conflict that seems to engulf the largest church in that country, and that is the Orthodox Church. And Ethiopia's Orthodox Christian Church is locked in a bitter dispute with the government of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, alleging state interference in church affairs and threatening to hold mass protest that was supposed to be happening over the weekend, with the institution facing a historic schism. The crisis erupted last month when 3 rebel archbishops ordained 26 new bishops from Oromia and southern Ethiopia, claiming their cultures were marginalized by the mainstream Orthodox clergy. They have formed a breakaway group called the Holy Synod of Oromia and Nations and Nationalities. So before I even go further with the latest of this story, perhaps I'd like for us to understand the history behind this Orthodox Church in Ethiopia. And the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, that's what it's called, is the largest of the Oriental Orthodox churches, one of the few Christian churches in sub-Saharan Africa, originating before European colonization of the continent. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church dates back to its acceptance of Christianity by the Kingdom of Aksum in 330 and has between 36 million to 49.8 million adherents in Ethiopia. It is a founding member of the World Council of Churches. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church is in communion with the other Oriental Orthodox churches, the Eritrean Orthodox Tewahedo Church, Coptic Orthodox Church of Alexandria, the Malankara Orthodox Syrian Church, the Armenian Apostolic Church, and the Syriac Orthodox Church. And the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church has been administratively part of the Coptic Orthodox Church of Alexandria from the first half of the 4th century until 1959, when it was granted autocephaly with its own patriarch by Pope Cyril VI of Alexandria, the Pope of the Coptic Orthodox Church at that time. So a very small brief history. So you can see where this church dates back as far as before Christianity as we know it today was brought to this continent by the colonialist. This church was already in existence. So it is a church that is deeply rooted, a very strong church, if I may just put it that way, that has a huge following in Ethiopia, as I have stated there. Between 36 million to 49.8 million followers in Ethiopia, in a country that has over, I think in the morning I gave the wrong figures, but the population is in Ethiopia is just over 110 million, because Ethiopia is the second most populous country here in Africa. So that just a small brief understanding of why the Orthodox Church actually matters as far as the larger community of Ethiopia is concerned. And the Orthodox Church, like I said on Sunday, was supposed to be having demonstrations. And before I just get into that, around just the end of January, addressing cabinet members who were convened by a 6-month performance evaluation of government ministers, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed broke his silence with a remark on the ongoing controversy with the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, and called on leaders of the church to resolve their differences through dialogue and discussion. He also defended his government's track record of helping the church in the face of growing criticisms, including by the Ezima party, of roles being played by the ruling party to divide the church by helping the breakaway archbishops. The Prime Minister's remarks came amid growing criticism that his government is siding with the breakaway archbishops and security forces are detaining and pressuring religious leaders who are against the breakaway archbishops. And so the reason why the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is being dragged into this mess, he is from Oromia. And the breakaway religious leaders who are from this part of Ethiopia. And they gave reasons, I think 2 reasons as to why they want to secede and I guess form their own branch of this church. And one, they're saying, they're being, there's a discrimination as far as their language and their culture, I think, is concerned. And they're saying the church leadership in that region is not considering, is not considerate of the different cultures outside of other regions, and also the language, which I think is really, from what I've been listening from the experts and people who are really understand the history and how the church operates in Ethiopia, they say that cannot be true, because the church has it in its constitution that whatever, say, a region and there's a certain language that is predominant in that region, then the services are meant to be carried out by using the language that is predominant in every region. I see it even here in Kenya. Say the Anglican Church, it is all over. It is all over the country. And so when you go to, say, in Nyanza, you'll find that they will have an English service, and then they will have another service that is carried out through the use of the dominant indigenous language in that place. And maybe we'll have somebody interpreting just in case there's other people in the congregation who do not understand. So I think that has been, and other parts also of the country. So that has been how this church has been running its affairs. For those who understand, they're saying these reasons, or this one of the key things that this breakaway clergy are citing to be one of the reasons why they are operating, how they're operating, and they want to break away from this main church is because of the language barrier or the language issue. But they're saying this is just a cover-up, because that is not what actually is happening there. And Amara region, Oromia and Amara, this is the bulk of where Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's, votes are. And, there has been a lot of things happening in Ethiopia. And so there are critics who are saying that this church leadership, the issue of language and cultural inclusivity is just something that they're using for a cover-up, because they believe there is a political undertone to that. And as I said, Prime Minister Abiy comes from Oromia, and these clergy from this region are saying the people of Oromia are being discriminated upon because the language is not being used during the services and things like that, which have been disputed by those who understand how the services are run there. So the reason as to why Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's name now is being dragged into this, because the church, the Orthodox Church as we know it, through its synod, its leadership, has been critical of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed in the recent past, since he came to power. When he was a bit reluctant to hold elections, the church was very vocal in that regard. The leadership of the Orthodox Church was very vocal in that regard, and they've been raising their voices when it comes to matters of national importance. So that could make us understand why perhaps Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed might not be very comfortable, because we've seen how voices of dissent sometimes are being met with the government. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, as much as people were hoping that he could be different and perhaps being a more younger a leader, and perhaps since he's been abroad and all that, so maybe he could be open to a certain levels of freedoms. And so when he came, and especially after restructuring and forming this party of, he calls it the Party of Prosperity or something, and what happened that put its government in loggerheads with the TPLF, who had been in power for 27 years. He's sort of he did upset the status quo, and he did upset the politics of Ethiopia as we know it. And so a lot of things that he's doing now, it's a shocker to so many who perhaps might have thought that he's different. So when he came, And some of these things that he started doing and a lot of other issues that have started taking place there. The church in Ethiopia, as I've said, it has a huge following, and just going through the history of this church, it dates way back. So the Orthodox Church in Ethiopia is just part and parcel of the people and the culture and the country, and it's just intertwined with a lot of the everyday life of the Ethiopian people. Although in the recent past there has been some especially the younger generations opting to join other Protestant churches because they feel the Protestant churches are a bit accommodative and are a bit inclusive, because the Orthodox Church is a bit what you would call is a bit conservative and may not be accepting of some of these, maybe these trends or things like that as far as part of their services and all that is concerned. So more and more younger generation in Ethiopia opting to join other denominations. So that also is there. So the rebel bishops appointed leaders without consultation, as I was just reading through the introduction, that sparked what we are now seeing the fallout. And there has been accusations that these rebel leaders are being supported by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. Of course, claims that he has not even responded to these claims. So as I was just going through this piece from the end of January, the Prime Minister said that the government has been supporting this church, and and he also advised his ministers and government officials to stay out of the politics of the church and let the church, figure out its own issues. The Prime Minister's remark came amid growing criticism that his government is siding with the breakaway archbishops, like I said, and the security forces are detaining and pressuring religious leaders who are against the breakaway bishops. And the Prime Minister Abiy said that religious institutions should cleanse their insides from politics, thievery, and racism. Okay, now, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, you're right in there in the church politics. How do you know about the thievery that is happening in the church? How do you know about the racism? So you really, now that just going through this, you can see why the bishops now, the archbishops, the leadership of that church could feel why they would, have the feeling that Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is indeed supporting this breakaway. Because if these are the comments that he made, that the church should cleanse itself from politics, from thievery, and from racism, Prime Minister, I think sometimes our leaders don't really understand. There are some things that you can say in public, but there are some things where another person can say it, and perhaps it's fine because it doesn't carry the heaviness. But if a prime minister of a country, leader of a country, you make these kinds of comments in a platform that Ethiopians will hear, and you're saying things like this, and you're accusing the church to be racist, and you're accusing the church to be full of people who are stealing, perhaps maybe the leadership, that is what you made reference to, and the church to be engaging in politics. I think that is where we yourself, you did not draw the line. So for you to one hand say, let's leave the church to solve its own issues, and yet on the other hand, you're coming out and making these comments that really can trigger this kind of whatever now is the falling out we're now seeing, then it makes sense, whether it's true or not, but it makes sense why the other side would feel as if you're supporting this breakaway, because it is the same things that you're saying, and those are the same things they're using as their reasons to wanting to break away and form another synod outside of what we know to be the leadership of Ethiopian church. So that is what he said, which he said were contrary to the principles and values of religion. There is, and I said here, when I was giving you just a brief history on where the history of separation of powers between the state and religion came. There's a war that happened. It's called the 30 Years' War that happened, that ended in, 1646. And at that time, the Catholic Church was the dominant religion. Actually, the Catholic Church was both the church and also the leader at that time. There was no state or government as we know it today. So after a long 30 bloody, brutal years of war, that is where principles of state and statehood was formed. And this treaty that was signed in 1648, is it 1646? Thereabout, is referred to as the Westphalian Treaty that laid the foundations of diplomacy as we know it today, and also introduced us to the concept of state and statehood. And on that treaty, it was decided that states will be sovereign. That is because at that time the Catholic Church also was engulfed in the same things that now the Prime Minister is accusing this Orthodox Church to be. The Catholic Church at that time was accused of in fact a lot of corruption at that time, and how the leadership was carrying out its things. So a lot of people had opted to join the Protestant churches. So if you were not following what the Catholic Church was saying, so the Catholic Church and its leadership was very strong-handed in that regard. So there were those who were fighting not to want to be led by the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church was insisting, we have to, we are the ones who are in charge here, and thou sayest the Lord. That was like the law of the land. So after a bloody fight, and which took a political undertone, and an eruption of so many other things that happened at that time, the statehood and state, these principles was formed, and there was separation of state and Catholic Church. The church was said, now you don't have a place in politics. We will have what we call states, and these states will have political leaders. And that's where we saw the birth of state and statehoods. Of course, after so many other years later, we've seen how that has evolved and developed, and today we have what we have today in the world. So maybe Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed did not get that memo. There is a separation, even if you have to comment on religious matters. I think there's a way to go about it that you don't look like you're interfering, because maybe those are just comments Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed made, and maybe there's not much to read into it. But why would you make such comments? Why would you make such comments? And when you're saying, you're criticizing the leadership of the church, and you're saying that the institution needs to be cleansed from politics, from thievery, from racism, and you're saying these things are just contrary to the principles and values of the religious beliefs of the Orthodox Church. But the trend has been repeatedly witnessed in the Ethiopian case, he said, leaving a trail of breaking up history, hindering development, and damaging social existence. So obviously, the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed compared his government with the government of the past, specifically the Derg, which he said had killed, and the EPRDF, which he said had expelled with a letter and respective patriarchs of the church. So he's saying, I'm better off because, some of my predecessors had done worse. So I'm just trying to, I'm trying to stay away, but also the church needs to do right. But Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, you're not staying away. So this was at the end of January this year, and of course there had been, it's not the first time that such a thing has erupted, such a disagreement has erupted, and so I think it will be very difficult for Prime Minister to get himself out of that. So the latest on this story, there were some demonstrations that had been planned for Sunday following a meeting, but were cancelled following a meeting with Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. Why are you meeting with the church leadership and asking them to cancel a demonstration? So there was a demonstration that was planned by the leadership of the Orthodox Church, and also there were demonstrations that were planned by the breakaway, the rebels. So Prime Minister, the protest followed the creation of a breakaway synod, as I have been explaining, by the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, bishops in Oromia, which the Prime Minister is accused of supporting, and he is an Oromo, so that is his region. And the breakaway bishops accused the church of discrimination and linguistic and cultural hegemony. saying congregations in Oromia are not served in their native language, claims rejected by the head of the church, and which truly, I was just in the process of just doing my research and listening to the people from Ethiopia. They're saying this is not true. The church services normally takes place by the use of the dominant language in whatever parts of Ethiopia, unless in the cosmopolitan region like maybe Addis Ababa, but still they make sure that their services are inclusive. I'm not sure about the cultural part and these other things that they're saying. And the secretary to the Patriarch of the Orthodox Church, Abune Petro, said the Holy Synod postponed the rally that was supposed to take place yesterday, February the 12th, peaceful demonstration for an indefinite period of time, not because of a change of position, but because of the government's agreement and decision to solve the problem immediately. Why is the government, what position does the government has in this conflict? And why is the government the one supposed to be helping in solving this problem if the same government is being accused of supporting the splinter group? I don't understand. And at least 30 people have been killed in protest past week. And I was just in the process of my research. These people who were killed were not protesting. Apparently they'd gone to church and these attacks happened. It is the security forces allegedly who attacked and killed these worshippers inside the church. So they are not part of the protesters. These are people who had gone to church to worship, and the security forces attacked them. So these are allegations. And the Orthodox leaders have long complained of persecution, including the banning of churches several years ago, and relations with the government have been tense in the past, including over the Tigray conflict. And there has been widespread tensions caused by the rift in the church that have resulted into the suspension of access to social media. That was the latest move by the government. The church, which recently denounced a splinter group in the country's largest region as illegal and accused Ethiopia's government of interference in its affairs, it has threatened to go forward with the rally, which it has that was suspended. And I don't know why the Ethiopian government is always quick to, censor the social media. I don't know why they're normally very quick to do that. I can understand, because this is not a political thing. But when you come in with such, when you come in with such moves, then now clearly people are left to wonder, what is it with this conflict and what has the government got to do with it? Because if this was just a church politics, it should be left to the church and let the church deal with it. But if now the government is going to the extent of even closing down social media and trying to censure social media over these matters, so what is your stake in this conflict, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed? What does the government has to do with anything? I can imagine we've seen conflicts here, even say in the Anglican Church. We've seen in major churches, in the Catholic Church perhaps, not so much, but those are the churches that we've had here for a long time, bit established. But there's no time and day I ever had a Kenyan political figure or leader even getting their, opinion in these issues, because church and state, there should always be a separation. A church is supposed to be a place of refuge, a place everybody goes and feels they are included, a place everybody goes and feel they are at home, because that is, and they're loved, because the core message of the church is love. That is like at the core of Christianity. So if you go to a church and these allegations that you're being discriminated upon and now politics seems to be taking center stage, I think there's something clearly amiss, and there's something we're not being told. And by the government of Ethiopia making such moves, I think this just goes to add to already these existing allegations that the government of Ethiopia is indeed interfering with this church and perhaps is supporting, the splinter group there. Because that has been the allegation. And on February the 3rd, 3 people were killed, and they were attacked in a church in southern Ethiopia. And the violence erupted against the backdrop of, the tensions that I've mentioned to you about. So these people were killed in the church. So I think this, the unity of the Ethiopian church, that is what the name of the church actually means, Tewahedo. Tewahedo means a united church, a united church. So the unity of the church, of the Ethiopian church, one of the oldest in the world, which accounts for about 40% of the country's 115 million population, is under threat. And the church, headed by Patriarch Abune Matthias for a decade, has declared the breakaway synod illegal and excommunicated the bishops involved. So the Prime Minister was I guess, was not happy with that, because he's been accused of supporting and interfering and supporting this breakaway, section of the church. So anyway, I will not bore you so much and, be repetitive of what I've already said there. So I think from this, the information and just the information I've been taking you through and the explanations that I've given there, clearly, as much as the government would like to distance itself from what has been happening then from these allegations, but the moves that the government is making and the kind of, whatever it's doing there, just raises more eyebrows. And why would you block Facebook? Why would you block Telegram? Why would you block TikTok and Messenger? These are the places that have been blocked. What is it? Because now you're really interfering with the affairs of that church, and you're saying you're not, because that was not your place. And I think you should allow, I think a society that is healthy and has a healthy democracy, these are things that should be allowed. Conversations should be allowed. I can understand what social media can do. Social media has played a part in some of these recent, revolutions that we've seen, some of these moves that have toppled governments around the world that we've seen. So I do understand the power of the social media, but that was just going to be between the church. So by the government coming in now, it has become politics, and even the breakaway bishops. Now this plays into the accusations that they're being accused that this language issues they're raising, this cultural discrimination they're raising, is not really an issue. It's just a cover-up because the church operates in a way that is inclusive. So it's quite interesting. And of course, the Prime Minister asked officials to stay away out of the church politics, but he's been like the move I've just shared with you there of blocking social media and things like that. That is not staying away from the church affairs, Prime Minister. That is you being there in the core and in the middle of that matter. And so I think this conflict, if it's not properly handled, I think it does have the capacity to cause some instability in Ethiopia, and that is because of the huge following that the church has in the country. And I've explained to you the history of this Orthodox church has in Ethiopia. It is intertwined in Ethiopia, and so it is at the core. It is at the core of Ethiopia as a country and and its people. So I think this is something that should be handled very carefully. This is something that requires some sobriety, and we should not get politics in our churches. I think there should be a clear separation of politics and religion. Because the minute we marry these two together, then now we are creating something that we might not be able to handle, because politics and religion, these are two emotive issues that should not even commune. These two things, the church should be left, and politics should be done in a way that does not interfere in any way with the religious practices or any kind of religious affiliation in a country. So I think it will be for the interest of the people of Ethiopia if this matter can be solved in a way that is diplomatic, in a way that will not add to already the ethnic tensions that exist. Because I can tell you, the Tigrayans, as much as this peace process went on ahead and the mediation happened and now things seems to be going well, let me tell you, those people, that's a wounded section of the Ethiopian community. Don't think they will ever forget this conflict. Don't think they will ever forget the people who died from that region. Of course, the TPLF also caused harm and deaths and loss of property on the other side in attacking other communities, but they will never forget. So this is something that has been etched in their own history. This is something they'll live to tell the children, the children's children. This will be part of, we suffered because of, we are Tigrayans, or Tigranians as they call themselves. So if you already have a very sensitive situation around ethnicity, and you want to fill these tensions now from the political fields to the church, you want to bring that dirty politics in the church, that is a problem. And this is something that should not be taken lightly. I think the church leadership needs to come together and stand with the people and make sure they are able to address some of these concerns that are being raised, the exclusivity and things like that. They need to ensure that and assure their congregants that that is not the case, and do it, in a way that unites everybody in Ethiopia. Because I think there are so many things happening there. I know there's an active conflict already with the Oromia Liberation Army and movement as well, that the government needs to deal with and has refused to deal with. So if now these other matters around the same region are coming up, I think it's just a cocktail of disaster, and it's just a war that we keep postponing, and that might erupt. Okay, you just need to mess with people's religion, because we hold, especially Africans, we hold our religious beliefs and practices very close and near and dear to our hearts. Like, that is something that we take very seriously. So when you mess with that, then you're creating another problem that you might not be in a position to solve. So that's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying, that some of these issues that are being brought up, do they have any standing? Are they legitimate? And can the church leadership speak on it? Of course, the church leadership has said, no, that is not true, because that is not how things are done. But these breakaway leaders, what is their intentions? Who are they speaking on their behalf? Of course, Prime Minister Abiy and his government have been accused of supporting them. But what really is at the root cause? And why would the government sponsor the splinter group outside of the non-synod, the leadership of the church? Okay, so these are questions that the church needs to reflect on itself, and just see how can they do better to be an institution that unifies the people of Ethiopia, an institution that will not let politics penetrate it and be a place where there is disintegration. A church should be uniting, should be fostering love and unity. So if that is not the case, then the church needs to go back and see, so where did we go wrong? What kind of leaders do we appoint or anoint, I don't know, in these positions? Okay, so they need to go back and relook at their own way of doing things, minus the politics, and just see that the church remains the church and the state stays over there and deals with politics, and that everybody is able to do what they're supposed to be doing. so that we separate these two things. Otherwise, if these politics continue and the amount of support because there has been some protest every other time in support, one side supporting the leadership of the church and the other, this might go back to that 30-year war I was talking to you about. Because religion is a very emotive matter, and usually it excites a lot of emotions and all that. So you only need to play with that for some time, and you can see what will happen. So it is a very sensitive issue. So I'm just hoping that they will have the wisdom to address this matter in a way that will not be detrimental to a country that is already coming from a very long, unnecessary, expensive war that claimed so many lives, even as it starts to rebuild. But Prime Minister, my advice to you, just weigh what you say in public. Some of the comments that you've made only exacerbated the situation, did not help things. All right, you don't stand in a public forum and make such statements, okay? You don't do that, because you're only fueling the fire. You're only inciting some of these existing, sentiments. So you're only adding to that, okay? You should understand that what you say matters, and how you say it also matters. And if you're saying that your government is not interfering with the church affairs, then you need to start acting like it, and you need to start sounding like it, I think. All right. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. My name is Miriam Ogutu. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.